This is the visual guide for me to know I started recording here. What are you licking my foot for?
Hello?
Hello.
You're good.
Oh, I didn't hear what you said.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Ready? Are you recording, Tyler?
That I am.
Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome to the latest Comics Pals book club. This is our book club for July, and we left it up to the patrons as we do now. This was one of 4 selections that we're about to talk about. Thor, God of Thunder, ended up winning our book club vote for the month. Now, what's funny about this to me is that there were only 4 selections because my book won the pick last month, Uncanny Avengers. And so I didn't get a vote. I didn't get a pick. I'm not supposed to be hosting right now. But as it turns out, you guys love Marvel Avengers characters. So maybe we'll just have to not let them be in because something's got to stop me from hosting these things.
I
What
thought it
if
very
the
funny
actual-
that it was the practical choice of the media
Sure,
alignment
yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, fine, we get it. You guys are on the ball.
What if they realize?
hosts.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. What if they realize, like, oh, this is a Kale pick. Oh, that's obviously a Marco pick. Oh, that's a Tyler pick. That means Sean's hosting by default, right? All right, let's pick that one. There we go.
Which person do they give the most grace to? I feel like Tyler probably picks like the second in terms of like more mainstreamy comics.
Not next month. Not next month.
Oh.
I would have thought mine was pretty good this time.
Actually, Kale was number 2, I believe. Kale had chosen Crisis on
Crisis.
Infinite Earths, and
Yeah.
that came in second in the voting. So if you guys want to take part in the voting so that you can influence next month's book club, join us on patreon.com/the Comics Pals. For as little as $3 a month, you can engage with our content over there, get our newsletter, and support the show. If you want to influence the book club, though, that's a little bit more of a price there. That's the $10 tier, I think, $7 tier, something like that.
I believe it's 7, yeah.
But you get to influence the book club, you get to take part in the votes, you get to read our newsletters, you get to listen to our exclusive podcast, Palling Around over there. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do by joining us on Patreon. So without further ado, I do want to get into Thor, God of Thunder. So we did volume 1 and volume 2. And this is basically the stuff that inspires, it's a portion of the stuff that inspires the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder.
That's God Butcher and God Bomb.
Right, God Butcher and God Bomb. So this run started in November of 2012. This is a piece of Jason Aaron's run. Asad Rabich was on this as well. Did the pencils and inks, colors by Dean White, typically paired with Assad, and letters by Joe Sabino. This is from the Marvel Now era, and it's funny because we just did a book from the Marvel Now era, Uncanny Avengers. So this is one of those one of the few books that I personally really enjoyed from this particular era of Marvel comics. Marvel was changing; they were getting away from the Civil War stuff, but we did get some really cool runs and seeing Marvel kind of shake things up. Getting, Jason Aaron Thor, getting still Rick Remender over there at Marvel. Things were getting shaken up. It was a cool time, but around when I stopped liking Marvel as much. At this point, it's really not relevant Thor's past for this particular run, so I'm not going to get into where Thor had been at the time. This starts you off in a place where you don't need to know anything about Thor other than that he's the God of Thunder. And kind of maybe general traits of his personality, but I even think you can get that from this book. In my mind, this is like a quintessential Thor story. You can hand this to any person. It's one of the things I love so much about it.
Yeah, I very
Thor
much felt
story?
that.
Is that like a history or her story? Now
Thor
there's
story.
Thor story?
Well,
Yeah.
based on what this book is, yeah, kind of, you're right.
Yeah, this
Good
is Thor
joke.
story. Yeah. Thanks, Sean.
I absolutely felt that where I was able to walk into this book and I was just like, oh, this was a reset for the character that I know because I only know him through the movies, and this felt much more, not necessarily jovial, but like composed, and hot out the gate, Sean, genuinely fucking love this book. This shot
Oh,
up
okay.
on my there were moments, and I took a few screenshots. We'll get into it, but like this shot up to be like, oh, this is like some Swamp Thing level shit for me.
Wow,
What?
Marco.
Like this shit.
I don't think I've ever heard you speak that glowingly about
Oh.
a comic with superheroes in it other than Swamp Thing.
So
issue 1 got me.
Wow.
So previous to recording, Marco messages us saying, "Oh, I have a hot take for this," and I'm expecting like, "Oh, I can't deal with this Asada remake art. Oh, I don't like this." Literally, that was not what I was expecting.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of
for real.
happy about that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
This is rad, dude.
Kale, what about you?
Oh, I hate the Asada Ribic art.
We know that.
Yeah, still period. Nothing changing there.
But what about the the story?
Yeah, I really enjoy the story. I read this. I feel like I read this fairly recently. But I didn't remember reading it. So I'm not sure if I read past it or what, but I knew what was happening, but the details were fuzzy. So I feel like I got to enjoy it on a different level, which was good. Got to think about religion, which is fun. Yeah, no, I like this.
Okay, Tyler, I know you've read this before. Of course, I'm pretty sure you love this shit. So go ahead and gush.
This is my bread and butter. This is my type of shit. For me, I had been reading Thor since Straczynski.
Yep.
So like I went through like the Fraction stuff. I suffered through Fear itself and stuff like that. Although it wasn't imminent on art. That shit was good. But once they announced Jason Aaron was on Thor, I was a big Jason Aaron guy, so I was excited to see what he can do. Like I was big into Jason Aaron back when like Ghost Rider was a thing, when he was doing Ghost Rider and Wolverine. Like those were two of my favorite books at the time. So once I heard he was on Thor, arguably one of my favorite characters at the time, I was hyped for it. I had no idea who Asad Ribic was though. Like that was a guy that kind of flew under the radar for me. But once I first opened up like the first issue, and then even doing it again on my reread here, I was like, oh, this is modern. Like this is almost like a modern day Frazetta. Like this feels like a kind of Metalhead's van in comic book form in this large story that deals with gods being gods. I feel like a lot of the Thor story that we've had throughout the years has always been like gods versus gods, where the actual influence that gods have on their worshippers is negligible.
Right.
Where that's really the driving factor here. That's who Gore is, and I assume we'll talk about Gore and everything like that. But like, my atheist ass was loving this stuff, Like, I was like, oh yeah, I'm into this. I fuck with Gore. I kind of like him.
You know what? My faithful ass. I get it. Yeah, Gore.
Right? Yeah.
If you're speaking my language.
Yep. I think there's that quote that's like, how does a benevolent God allow such pain in the world, or something like, not a quote, but like a discussion. And that's literally like the core theme of this. Paired with the absolute idiot that Thor is, like as a person, as a character, let alone a god. So I think he's a great kind of foil for Gore in this. I love this stuff. This is great.
Yeah, I said it earlier. This was one of the books from Marvel now that, sold me on the concept of moving on and letting these characters kind of, I think Marvel started to separate and stop feeling so like such a close thing in these years. And this is one of the books that was like, okay, yeah, I'm cool with that. Thor doing his own thing, being in a Thor story, something like this. Yeah, absolutely. A new villain also. We're going to talk about Gore, like you said. Gore is the main antagonist of Love and Thunder, and there's a great reason for that. Gore is one of the best villains to come out of the modern, if you consider modern to be from like, the Quesada era. He's one of the best villains to come out of that era, I would say.
Mm.
And I didn't think about this beforehand, so I might be wrong, but probably one of the most recent villains to be appearing in a movie, one of the recent villain creations.
I think I crunched the numbers, and it might be the shortest creation to movie jump, because I think Miss Marvel was even before this, or right around the same time.
Miss Marvel was around the same time.
Yeah.
Still no movie.
Right around that time.
I
Yep.
think she was 2010. Yeah.
Still, though, like the timeline between that is tiny compared to everything else, which is impressive out the gate.
Yeah, exactly. The character really just stood out immediately. And Miss Marvel is wow, no, there's no answer here. Are you kidding me?
There's
Okay.
dispute over when her first appearance is. But.
Yeah, 2010 technically, I think. But yeah, so we got a great villain, a character who, has had some pretty good stuff of late in Thor, but needed something, I think, at the time to really take Thor to the next level. And this ended up being that. It even has an interesting layout. And I want to talk about that first, is the way that the story is told. And so Jason's idea was to tell a story that requires 3 different phases of Thor. So again, if you're new to Thor, you're getting to see 3 different versions of the character. And each one of them pretty much encompasses what Thor is, one aspect of Thor's character. And so you really get a full understanding of who Thor was, who he is now, and who he will be at the end of his life. So that's a pretty interesting way to showcase the character, especially if you're new to the character. And each one of them has something in common, and that is, other than being Thor, this Gore villain, Gore the God Butcher. And so each issue shows, until the end, one of the Thors, each of the Thors rather, dealing with Gore, or dealing with the existence of Gore and how it affects their lives. So it's a really cool premise and way to tell the story, and it dovetails pretty nicely. How did you guys feel about that framework for a story?
It feels like, I know you guys clown on me for always having the food analogies, but it
There
feels
we go.
like the appetizer sampler of Thor. You know what I mean? Like, it shows you like, oh, this is the shit we're working with. Here are all the good parts of Thor, or the parts that we haven't seen yet with old King Thor. I think that's a smart way of going about it, because Thor has been a lot of things throughout the years. I think it's a good way of introducing the character, and also like it kind of ups the stakes a bit too, because you feel like if it was just Thor, you're like, all right, he's safe. Like, it's Thor. Marvel's not going to kill Thor. They just did it, 5 years ago, like before Straczynski's run.
Right.
Like, that's not an issue. But if there are multiple Thors, well, you don't know what's going to happen, So I thought it was a fun little storytelling device.
Especially starting the story with young Thor, and where he's so volatile and you can't quite tell how strong he is compared to Gore, and then putting him with the older Thors. Young Thor goes out, that's it. That I was surprised at how strong he was, but also how little protection he required.
Yeah, like he was more than capable of handling himself.
Yeah,
even alongside these other Thors who you would imagine are more powerful, but maybe they're not. Maybe they just have more expertise because they've been in more situations. But yeah, they were all beasts. And that's one of the things I love about this story too. A lot of times Thor gets, it feels like he's underpowered. And here, he's not underpowered at all. He's just facing someone who's so ridiculously strong that it takes all this, all these Thors to deal with him. I love that aspect. They don't pull any punches from Thor's power level.
Yeah, I think the timeline, the way that gets broken out also helps to add to the stakes, because you can see, okay, if he's not stopped, this is the inevitable end for Thor, and to me that added to the power of Gore. It added to, Thor's tenacity, because he had to, up until the end, trying, and is making his way to be able to try to defeat Thor, and it speaks to his character. And I think through the that storytelling device, that shines through his character.
I forgot how much I loved this, and I remembered it being a lot more straightforward and not really having too many reflections on it as a story and what it was trying to say. I actually think this was a very, like, this book had a lot of depth to it. Gore, to talk a little bit about what he wants and who he is, he's a regular old person from a planet that the sun never sets and the people are dying. They don't have any food. They're getting by off scraps and they're dying. And they're praying to their gods to help them, to make it rain, to give them food, and it never happens. And Gore watches, people around him dying. He grows older, watches his wife die, his children, and he's just done with it. And so he's cast out. And by chance, the two warring gods, land on this nameless planet, and Gore watches them fight, and one of them asks for help, and Gore's like, "You son of a bitch, you have the audacity to ask me for help after all this stuff." And then Gore gets this weapon, and he kills these gods, and he decides, you know what, that felt pretty good. I'm going to go see how many others I can kill. That's a raw character arc. That's a raw origin for a character. And I'm just gonna go and kill every god.
It's personal. Like at that point, it's I went through the experiences of a horrible life, and now when I needed it most, I didn't get the help. And your point, the audacity to be this god to say help. I'm like, oh, we're done. If this god requires help from me, the only help I will provide is ending that life, because I don't give a shit anymore. And that to me was like, oh, this is a fucking perfect character. This as a from here, I'm like, okay, I get what he's trying to do, and I understand why he's out for vengeance. He's been burnt. He experienced it, and you can't take that away from him. You can't talk him out of that. You can't. And the irony being, it is almost a religious fervor to him at this point now, and that's, I think, I love that dichotomy that we get here, that Aaron tries to really balance, is to what extent is this fanaticism and this potential for danger in Gore actually godlike, and they continue to pose that question and balance, the wrath of a god versus the kindness of a god, which is contrasted with Thor.
I also think that, I was gonna say that Gore is kind of relatable in a way. Like you feel for him. His life fucking sucks. Like literally everything imaginable that can happen happens to him, and it's not good. And meanwhile, everyone surrounded by him is like, nah, you gotta believe, you gotta keep believing, you gotta believe in. And he's just like, fuck that. Like, I get it, dude.
It's a bit like being an American right now.
Yeah, no, you're not even wrong. Yeah, I agree. So like once I read, that was the Butch Geist issue, which was like Gore's backstory. I think it was like issue 6 or 7 or something like that.
It was 5.
Yeah, it was. I actually really liked that issue.
It was great.
It very succinctly stated Gore's MO throughout it. We knew kind of like he wanted to kill gods. We never really knew why, and like, oh, it's because gods never did anything for him, so he has a bone to pick with them, and I really like that. I thought it's a very simple way to give him justified reason for doing all this. And it also made me kind of question, like, why am I agreeing with him? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's more that they did nothing for him. More than that, they did nothing for anyone. He never saw the benevolence of a god. He never saw the kindness of a god ever at all. And he's just unlucky. The fact that he was born in a place where the gods don't give a damn sucks. But Thor is the direct contrast to that because we see that Thor helps people. He goes to some other planet to help a person who was praying to him and helps because he's Thor and he's a good god, and that's what he does.
I think that bugged me to a degree though, because at what point is that Thor in his lifespan, right? Like, at what point was Thor benevolent? It took him 900 years to be 30-year-old Thor that was like, oh, let me bring water to this desert,
like Avengers
versus
Thor. Yeah.
20-year-old Thor who just killed and fucked.
Well, to be fair, he helped the Vikings, and they, as much as they prayed to him, they interacted with him. So I think up until that point, I'm sure he was a benevolent god to those local to him. And then once he could fly and do his spacefaring stuff, then he's like, oh, this child, and he explicitly calls out that this child, right, like for the sake of that child, I'm going to provide some sort of assistance.
Yeah, I would say my experience with Thor is that he's always been a good person, but he has also had flaws as in his youth that were more akin to a god than the way he is now. So he was, obviously, we know, selfish, greedy, a drunk and all that jazz, but I think he still fought in defense of people. And we see that is a part of him throughout his entire existence. And one of the cool things about this story is that it humanizes Thor in the sense that we see his whole life. Just like a human would. He grows, he changes, he evolves, he gets to old age and will likely die soon for a god. And that's human. It's human to grow old. And I love that it humanizes him in a story where his godliness is the reason he should die. It's what makes him a target.
I always read young Thor as like having real rich kid energy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then modern Thor is like the antithesis of that. So like when they, once those two start interacting, it's great. And then like old King Thor is even further gone. He's like gone in the whole opposite direction. So seeing them all interact too is that was one of my real favorite parts of the book too.
Yeah, we're jumping around. That's one of the coolest parts of the story, where the three Thors get together. And I think, Aaron probably wanted that. Like, he probably saw that as like an end goal. Like, I really think it'd be great if we get all three Thors together. But what's so cool is the magic of the way that, they're able to get the Thors to that point, and that it doesn't feel far-fetched or ridiculous. Like, you don't have to, turn your brain off to understand how this could be possible. Obviously, it's timey-wimey comic stuff, but it makes sense within the story, and it doesn't take away from the story to explain it. He doesn't spend a lot of time telling you how. But go ahead.
Sorry, just to that, I think he keeps it simple because it's just a one timeline, right? Where sure they jump around in it and explicitly enter another time, but there's a linear just focus there that allows it to be a bit easier to understand. Because I think if it was jumping like multiverses and shit, I think that would be a different conversation and probably would have to be handled differently. But for the fact that it's this singular life, we're just jointly at a different point in it, I think makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And as I'm going through some of the pages here, one of the things I wanted to talk about from an art standpoint is how Assad was literally the perfect artist, I think, for this book. People say like, oh, comics are modern mythology, comic book characters and stuff. And there is a sort of, I don't know, like mythological presence that Assad's art has at times, if that makes sense. Like, I could see this being, drawn on cave walls, or something like that, like put up somewhere huge and big, and it represents moments in time for a mythological character, if that makes sense.
Sistine Chapel.
Yeah,
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 very much.
exactly.
It's I think like I think the color adds a lot to that. It gives it that washed out feel sometimes, which I
Yeah.
think can vary to people's liking, because sometimes you want that full brightness and you want that really comic booky color. But to me, it always felt like, and I took a screenshot of a specific panel, but it feels like he's drawing like sculptures. And if you, it's not great, but one of the
I get you.
pages
I got the picture.
looks straight just like he's drawing just a statue. It's etched into marble, because it's not the overly muscular where you have like 16 abs. It looks a lot more formed to an actual like person. You have the muscle structure, you have the veins that you can see on different, that you would see on some kind of just statue at a museum. And I think those are the things that he shines in.
One thing I really like about Asada Rubik, and I think Dean White really helps, is that you can see the pencils behind it all, which I think really lends to the mythical aspect of it. Like I think it's the same reason I really liked his work on Secret Wars. It's because like it's not trying to hide the fact that it's art. You know what I mean? Like it's not trying to really transport you. This almost feels like I could be reading it from a scroll that would be in the same library that's in this book. You know what I mean?
Right.
I have like it's like a weird soft spot when I can see the actual work being done behind the coloring.
Yeah.
And, any other colorist might, hide that, or, the inker might hide that, or even the artist might, with the inker, hide that. But I like how it's visible. You can see the lines behind everything. That's one of my favorite parts of Asada Rubik's art.
There was like texture applied to Gore every time that you see his like cloak, or he's enraptured in some sort of blackness. There's just these like squares that you can see he's like actually etching and like doing things with the pencil that add to a texture that I'm sure you can get in another way, but because it's in that pencil, there's a softness to it, because the weight of the lines it's very smooth. They're not thick, and so it adds to just this like almost like graininess, kind of like not the same, but in terms of a texture, like Gabriel Walta, where he like for vision, right, he adds this like a bit of just like dirt on the page that I think makes just elevates the art.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And even in the Thor Love and Thunder movie, as has been pointed out, there are shots that are ripped directly from the books. And that's a credit to Assad. Obviously, we all wish they'd credit him in money. But if nothing else, I know he was paid a pittance, but if nothing else, it is a credit to how talented he is that they just said, yeah, we don't need to add anything. This is good enough.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Just to keep on the Assad Rivet train here, I think he also just understands the movement of comics really good, like just really, really well. He's able to, I took a screenshot of 2 pages where back to back he's fighting, and then you see his like Thor's body language change, where he from page to page, panel to panel, you can see him start to just win. See if this is gonna work. This is gonna work a little bit better. But on the bottom, he's down, he's on the floor. And then as you go over, he's standing up. Then in the next panel, he's on top of the villain. Then he's just straight up demolishing the baddies as they continue to come. And this all happens over a sequence of 2 pages and panels where he's on the ground, he stands up a little bit, then he's towering over, and then he's just like walloping people. And that's a really good just continuity of movement throughout the page that goes beyond just like you're posing people, right? And it's like, no, you're actually driving the narrative through the art.
Sure. I think he picks great moments to showcase too.
Yeah.
There's so many instances and examples of that. Like it's just really beautiful art. And this was I don't want to speak out of turn, but I feel like this was Assad's real breakout, I think.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have found someone better. And he was drawing for his life. He needed to become a staple of the industry, and I think he really did through this book. So he deserves as much credit for the success of this as Jason does, for sure.
Last call out. I swear, I fucking loved Rivers' art in this. In one of the last pages, as the second volume closes, where finally they're talking about like him addressing the prayer for this child that has water. He returns to go see like his work, right? And then you actually see in the panel the Trinity, where he's up top here, and the on the bottom he's like trying to pick up the hammer on this side, and then on the other end he's just like moping. It's the three Thors, but it's broken out as a triangle, and you essentially get a Trinity. I'm like, this guy's working fucking overtime right now. Like, my man's is good.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let's talk a little bit more about the story. So this is an 11 issue story, and I feel like they got a lot done in 11 issues. It really doesn't feel like that. It was also for me a page turner. Like I really enjoyed reading it from start to finish. And I think one of the things that help with that is the fact that you are getting 3 different perspectives, because it keeps things kind of fresh. Like the different eras that you're showing are visually different. They're distinct in a lot of ways. When modern Thor is like going to the library, for example, there's a lot more colors in that area. Old Thor, that world is screwed and basically dead. Young Thor, he's a Viking, so he's like, in a lot of like water and blue, and he was in Russia, former Russia, or would be Russia, and then he's on, Gor's planet, which is a dead world. So there's a lot of visual distinction, which I really enjoyed. Even though it's only the one artist aside from Butch Geis, who I was surprised to see because I haven't seen anything from Butch in a long time. So that was kind of cool.
Don't know him.
Butch did Tyler, help me out.
He was
Sorry?
he did some Cap stuff from what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. He was one of the like stable artists from Captain America.
I also think he did the like the past stories of the most recent Chip Zdarsky Invaders run, which sleeper hit. That book was fucking good.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about the modern Thor parts, is Thor's a good guy. And I think this is my favorite version of Thor, by the way. It's this version of Thor who's just altruistic, wants to do the right thing. I think Gore kind of dresses him down appropriately in that Thor recognizes his impotence in a sense. Because I think we probably all agree that to some degree Gore's correct, that gods suck and they don't do the right things. But Thor isn't a bad god. He just can't be everywhere. He can't do everything. I think if this version of Thor could solve the ills of the universe, he would do it. But he can't. All he can do is help one person at a time for the most part. But he saved Earth countless times. It's not enough. Because unlike Iron Man, unlike Captain America, Thor is cognizant of the suffering of trillions of people across the universe, and he cannot help them. And it's sad to come to a realization about your own futility in that sense, especially when your enemy is wiping out millions. And, Gore does that across time.
And I do like how old King Thor is the natural extrapolation from that. It's like, oh, now amplify that sadness for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
It becomes apathy almost. It becomes tiredness.
Exactly.
And he's just a grizzled, old, cranky fuck. Which, guess what? Guess who was like that? Fucking Odin. So I like how that mirror is placed in front of Thor too. And he's just like, he even thinks that's Odin at one point. Yeah, when
Right.
he first
They
meets him,
both
I was
do.
like, yeah. I thought that was great too. It's like, imagine you seeing future you and you get confused thinking it's your dad. Like, that'd mess your mind up, I think.
Yeah.
You sit there, you're like, fuck, I didn't
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
But what was interesting was I think all of that that culminates in a Thor that becomes much more reflective as he gets older. And so when he there's that like double talk that he kind of gives. He talks to the younger Thor where he's like, "Hey, stop fucking around and doing all this shit," right? And then the middle aged Thor, I guess, or the Avenger Thor comes over and it's like, "Oh, you shouldn't have been too harsh." And it's like maybe those words weren't for me. I'm like, "Oh, okay, clever guy, right?" And then he like really hits him with the shit, or just like, "You're never gonna become what your dad expects you to be." And he's just like he just gets hit because he's had the time to really understand his role and how his actions have affected his past, and he's now the wisdom driver, right? And they make jokes about it. He's like, "Oh, was I always this dumb?" and whatnot. um and he's just at that point he's still caring, but he cares for different reasons. He's trying to extrapolate truths beyond just like helping people.
He's trying to save them from having to have that realization and live with it for as long as he has.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a kindness that, only you can give to yourself. So I really love that no matter what you do, no matter how many people you save, you will never be as good as your father wanted you to be.
Yep.
That's brutal. But unfortunately, in Thor's case, it's true because his dad sucks, and he says as much when he's speaking with Gore's son, Gore's quote unquote son. Yeah. So I love how committed Thor is to doing the right thing, to saving people, and how equally committed Gore is to just killing, to being this awful monster and his evolution. Because as much as we see, Thor's journey from beginning to near end, we see that for Gore. We see where his life started. We see where, it's kind of the same thing. We see where his life started. We see when he's, a young Gore, still kind of new to what he's doing, and fails when he's, fighting young Thor. We see him when he's, middle aged and kind of in his glory, if you will. And he becomes more and more like the gods he despises. There's a great moment earlier in the book where they compare, where they talk about war versus murder. And Thor is reflecting on his father and seeing his father would kill thousands, millions. He'd come home with blood all over him and he was worshipped. Why is that different than why is there a distinction in the murder, in killing rather? Do you guys think that the book lands any one way on that?
I don't think it does on purpose.
Agreed.
Because it wants you to question it the same way Thor's questioning it.
Right.
It wants to be ambiguous. Like, even rereading this, like, honestly, even by the end of it, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of on Gore's side still. Like, I wasn't totally against him. Yeah, he was a little too much there. But I like how a little too much. I mean, yeah, making a giant bomb that kills all the gods. Like, chill, bud. But like, I get it. But I like how that question is never answered because it lets the reader answer it.
I think that's effective writing at that point, right? You don't want to hold somebody to a conclusion. You want to pose a question in an engaging way and show it on the page. And I think Aaron does a really, really good job of doing that consistently, because it also is, at what point do you become the evil that you see in the world, in the case of Gore, where he's like, okay, I have done all this stuff, and once everybody is dead, like, I'll finally be free. But then he is the thing that killed all the gods, and what can kill gods but gods? And he has to have an existential crisis at that point. but
I love that
refuses to look beyond the actual future.
And even then, like, what is a god? A god is something that has omnipotence, is all powerful, oftentimes all seeing, all knowing. Um, Gore has those black creatures that he sends to different planets that he said he's connected to. They're a part of him.
But some even gain sentience, and like he's like, well, I'm sure he did a thing, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. So
Marco,
he
do you know about that? Not to interrupt, Sean, but do you know what that is? What that's all about?
what
What his weapon is? Like, do you have?
it? No, but I'm assuming it's something related to like null.
Oh, okay. It's interesting. You
I made the assumption.
extrapolated.
Is it?
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay,
figured
cool.
just because I'm like this feels familiar from the Silver Surfer Black, and then some of the Venom stuff we've read.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. You're 100% right on that. Yeah.
Marco reads comics.
I fucking read comics, Tyler.
I know,
I have
I
a whole
know.
podcast, Tyler.
I've just experienced it linearly. So you trying to like know, putting the pieces together is interesting to me. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
If it makes you feel any better, I did.
And he reads comics.
Well,
His pick was Crisis on Infinite Earths. He reads a certain type of comic.
Oh man. Yeah. So the point I was driving at is that Gore essentially makes himself a god. But he can't accept that that's what he did. And I love that, we're shown later, his son, his wife, or at least his son, I think his wife too. They're just parts of him.
Yeah.
That he created. And so essentially, the son that he has that helps Thor in the end is actually himself. Because he hates gods. So yeah, he hates himself.
It's wild. It was good. It was excellently executed.
Yeah, just like Bret Hart.
I'm not gonna lie and say like I'm kind of excited to see like Christian Bale have that reaction, have that realization, because I think that's what we're getting in the movie, right? Although sans tentacle, there's no tentacle in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, we're here, so we might as well. I feel like this story told this way would have been really cool in a movie, especially where Thor's character is in the Marvel series, where he's kind of at a crisis of faith and a crisis of self. It would have been really cool to see him have to face himself from the past and future and kind of become the Thor he's supposed to be as they destroy the God Butcher. They chose to fuse the God Butcher stuff with the Mighty Thor stuff. I'm sure that'll work.
It's all Jason Aaron, yeah.
Yeah, I just would have really loved to see this translated to the films, and I think it would have been the perfect time.
Sorry, go ahead.
It really seems like they're going to use it to build out more of the Marvel world as well, adding Zeus and actual other gods into the picture for him to play off of. So.
Which is funny because I didn't realize that we had the name drop of the pantheons, in this book. Thor mentions Iron Man, which that Iron Man, I think it's like Mark 12 or something, that blue and that black and gold suit. Probably one of my favorites. I don't know why they didn't stick with that. I love
one of my
suit.
least favorites.
Oh, I love that suit, man. But he sends him. He's like, warn the pantheons. So like we're kind of getting the in between parts, which I kind of enjoy.
I think after reading this and then realizing, like, I felt like halfway through, I'm like, okay, the movie's not gonna be this, and I was kind of disappointed because I liked the gravity that this has. It has an energy to it, and it has a weight, and there's a message. And now I feel like if this was alone translated to Chris Hemsworth's Thor, fine. Diluted a bit, sure. I get it, but the fact that we're handling a lot more than just that now feels like they're gonna have to dilute further, and I don't want Gore to be a staple villain. Like it just be the name. And I've also seen him now visually in this series, and he's terrifying. And that translated to the film, it doesn't look like that. It looks like he's like this just old dude. It looks like Christian Bale and just being extra old. And
I saw somebody saying it looks like Christian Bale if he was starring as Uncle Fester in Zack Snyder's Adam's Family.
Yeah.
that's real good. But you know what? Like, yeah, and that's kind of disappointing coming off of this
Sure.
reading.
Indeed.
I don't know. I think this version looks like a weenie.
Weenie Hood Jr.
Yeah.
I like this version. I like the. It looks like a Star Wars character in the background that might have been at the Senate next to ET.
Yeah.
You know, like just
You're-
with a weird
Off-brand
Shock
Twi'lek.
tea or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, Twi'leks, man. Never mind. Keep going.
One of the other things that I really enjoyed was being able to see Thor as a leader, because I don't think we necessarily get that. He's usually like second fiddle to somebody, or he's kind of like almost like a buddy cop feel sometimes. But in this, there's a moment at the very beginning where they find the head of a slain god, and Thor just puts up this face where he's like horrified of what he sees. And then, you know, he turns around and he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like, let's go back to drinking and fucking." And as everybody walks, he stops. He gets serious, and he's like, he talks to the kid. He's like, "Boy, fetch some wood." Like, there's a process that now has to begin, and he removes himself from. He sobers himself up, essentially. It feels like, and he
Literally.
yeah, and he like starts to actually put on this investigative hat, for lack of a better term, crown, I guess. And he starts to figure out like, well, what happens here? And there are multiple instances where he does that when they get afraid of the of the fog, and they see something in the fog, and it's Gore that's, you know, kind of just running around, or sorry, one of the black extensions of him, and he tells him, he gives him this whole roaring speech about like not being afraid, and we're gonna go and kill these people, and then quietly on the side tells his person, it's like, "Hey, let's go slow. Like, I understand what my people are feeling, and I understand the role that I play." And he does that multiple times, and it culminates in this really great moment where when the Vikings come and save him from Gore, and he's at a loss to understand what's going on. All of those things built up to the fact that, well, they're going to die for him out of this glee. And it's not religious fervor. It is, I am happy to be dying for somebody that has affected me and done good to me. And the fact that Gore couldn't understand that, he just didn't have the capacity to. Super effective writing.
I love that bit where Gore was like, "No, I'm trying to help you guys." Like, it showed like where Gore's stake in the game was. Like, he did not want to hurt random people. That's not his MO. It's like, that's not the typical Marvel villain thing where he just wants to hurt people. Like, no, he's specifically with gods. And in fact, he thinks he's on the side of the everyman. I love that part of it. I totally forgot that was even like another wrinkle in Gore's story until I reread this, and I was like, "Oh man, that's the good stuff."
And I think that's a very interesting, you know, commentary on sort of society and how people deal with religion. There are people who are religious that are good people, for whom religion is something that helps them, it empowers them, it, you know, you could argue makes them better. They use it to make themselves better. I'll say it like that. There are other people who are religious, who do bad things, terrible things, and they use their religion to justify it. They hide behind the cover.
Specifically 5 of them right
now. There are people who don't believe in religion at all and think that people who do are stupid, and that they're the bane of this world and that they're ruining everything. You know, it comes in all shapes and sizes. And I think that what's interesting about this book is that it's not saying that religion is bad. It's not saying that God is bad. It's saying that Gore's perspective, his subjective experience, has led him to believe this thing. And he is applying objectivity to a situation that simply isn't. Because for these Vikings, Thor is a god, and he's a good one, and they die for him because he's done right by them. And Gore can't see that because he's never seen that. That's foreign to him. That doesn't exist.
Still, what makes me want to make a Gore is right T-shirt, though. I will say.
And to you, maybe he is, but I love that the story can be that.
Yeah,
It takes the time to do those different things.
And that it's a very Marvel Universe thing too, where like we know for a fact that multiple gods exist. That's something that doesn't exist in the real world. I mean, as a fact, you know.
Sure.
So seeing that in the comics, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see where Gore might be right on this. It's different if you factor that into reality, but
Right, he's right and wrong.
Yeah.
There are gods that devastate, their people. We've seen it in Marvel comics.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he's right and wrong, and I love that. It's just such a well told story from that standpoint.
One thing we haven't mentioned is Thor's granddaughters, who I think are great characters that persist throughout Jason Aaron's Thor run. Even I think it's currently in Jason Aaron's Avengers Forever run, his multiversal Avengers squad. They've showed up. I love them as characters. They're super it's literally the three aspects of Thor solidified into three different people.
Yeah,
Which I thought is a great idea of kind of continuing that timeline of Thor through other characters.
I appreciate that he specifically had granddaughters as well.
Yeah,
I thought that was cool.
The one that was just like, I had impure thoughts of my grandfather. Fucking hilarious.
Don't you hate when that happens?
Yeah.
Continue, Marco. Yeah.
I connected with that one.
All right.
Not for those reasons.
Oh,
It's my favorite Futurama line. Oh, I'm going to take lessons in time travel from Mr. I'm my own grandpa.
Towards the end, when Gore is, making the bomb, or the bomb is going to be made, finished, and the Thors fail to defeat him. Man, you really feel, because Thor's probably going to live. It'll all work out, but you really feel the tension. I thought of this stuff ratcheting to a close. Gore doesn't go out like a sucker. Like, he is in his glory. He's extremely powerful, and I love that his mistake. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just thinking of this. His mistake is that the only person we see him kill, who's not opposed him, who's not a god, is his wife.
The mother.
Yeah.
And his choosing to do that is why his son, quote unquote, betrays him. And that's what allows the Thors to win.
Assuming that was his like a reflection of his ego at that point, where he his son being like the the good angel on his shoulder, right? With the one that was standing by, because at the very least he has not killed an innocent. That for me absolutely was the turning point, right? That was the moment where he's like, oh, hold on a second, he's a hypocrite, and that is heretical, and we need to be done with that. And I will now not necessarily empower, but like I will talk to Thor about it and try to figure that out, because the son could not stand by that. I agree.
Yeah. I also love that Thor gets, he said earlier, I believe something to the effect of, I'll bite your eye out or something like that. And he ends up doing it.
Hell yeah.
That was awesome.
And baller ass move.
He made him like King Thor, because King Thor has a missing eye. This is the oldest version of Gore we'll ever see. He made him like it's the last version of Gore we'll see. He made him like old Thor. So we saw them the same in all phases.
That's fucking cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, like, just that last battle, dude, how cool was that when my man had both hammers, dude? When Thor had two hammers and he took in the shadow power or whatever, and then unleashed that crazy blast. Oh my god. And that's what Thor can do. Like, Thor is so powerful, and I feel like even in the movies we don't get to see him just go all out and do something really crazy.
Because he's stupid most of the time.
Sorry?
It's because he's stupid most of the time.
True. We kind of got it in Infinity War, where he did do some cool stuff. But other than that, But here they don't pull punches.
They do stuff in here that they can't do in film, I don't think. Like, just the scale. I mean, I guess they could do it. It's CGI, you know. They can do anything. They can bring people back from the dead, apparently, with CGI. But, like that image of the God Bomb when it first shown, like that is just, like, pure comics for me. You know, comics has a sense of scale that I don't think film can do. Which is funny because it's a piece of paper that is the size of your head, you know. But that sense of scale is just something that is just wild. I actually read this physically. I read this. I have the actual collection of it, hardcover. It's one of the few physical things I read.
Does it have the whole thing?
It's the first 2 volumes. Yeah. Nice. It's good stuff. It still has the AR pages in it, which I don't know is still in digital. Which the app doesn't exist anymore. So I thought that was pretty funny. But
I was gonna ask about that. I'm like, I kept seeing it pop up. I'm just like, can I even do this?
I kept trying to re-download it. It does not exist on the Apple App Store. You could probably get it on like some website, third party or whatever. But
sure. I kept reading this. I'm like halfway through.
Oh, really?
Nice,
dude. I read this in one night.
You have a lot to go, dude. And the best part is like you go from Asad Ribic to Russell Dauterman, so you're welcome. Very different, but very good.
Very different, and I did not appreciate that difference out the gate. It was super jarring. I needed to get used to it.
Oh, you're already there.
Wow,
Dauterman. You know, we talk about Dauterman's art in relation to, you know, the limited stuff that he's done in the X-Men world. But we've only gotten 2 actually drawn comics from him. Everything else has been artwork and concept design.
Yeah, dude's been a cover artist for years.
Cover art, him, you know, doing the interiors on a comic book full time is like a treat we might not get again. That's crazy.
I'm so happy you like this though, Marco. Like, you have so much to read now.
Yeah.
Yo, genuinely,
it's at least 50 issues. Yeah.
This was hype.
Yeah.
One last thing that we didn't really touch upon. I did want to shout out Joe Sabino because the letters I think were excellent. And it's one of those things you only notice good lettering until like you notice it. But he emphasizes bold words, where usually you kind of just pick a random word and you bold it. But here, a lot of the time, he carried weight, and I took a screenshot of one of the pictures, for example, where he's walking into the tomb of all of the gods when he's first like figuring stuff out. And the first 3 boxes here, no bolds, except for the very last one. And it goes through the list of the gods that have been killed. He's like Hogscar, the harsh, Crossskin, the cruel, Lady Vile, the goddess of atrocities, etc., etc. I recognize them all from the stories in these scrolls. These are the missing gods from Indigar. Thus is one mystery solved as another is born. And those are the 2 that get bolded. And then throughout the rest, he bolds out butchered, God flesh, nothing. And he calls out these words along the page. I'm like, okay, guy, I see what you're fucking doing. Top to bottom, dude. I fucking love this book.
So you prefer when the lettering tells you what to emphasize rather than you filling in the pieces?
It feels more dynamic. Yeah,
sure.
It feels more dynamic. I don't like when it's just you throw a bold word for the sake of comics.
As you were reading out those names, like those god names, that was like when young Thor first meets Gore, right? And Gore's like naming them. Is that no? This is when modern Thor is searching the cosmos and he sees. Okay.
Yeah.
There was a good part where it's young Thor where he meets the Slavs, the Slavic people, and they're like, "Oh, our gods are coming," and they don't show up because they're dead.
Yeah.
Those gods show up in Jason Aaron's Avengers run as part of like the Russian Avengers, which is like a great it didn't even occur to me because it didn't happen at this point when I read this originally, but like reading that now, I'm like, oh, those are 2 characters that show up constantly in the Russian Avengers squad and Jason Aaron's Avengers. So like, if you like Jason Aaron, dude, I got so many recommendations for you. A lot of his shit echoes each other, which is fun.
I think this and his Wolverine,
Wolverine,
are
the X-Men.
the top of his Marvel catalog, which is vast at this point.
Yeah.
A man's been grinding the Marvel work for years, and I think might be my favorite.
Agreed.
This was phenomenal. I'm so glad we read this. Thanks, readers, for choosing it. I had a blast, and I think this is inspiring me. We should probably do more of Jason Aaron's run down the road. Maybe the Mighty Thor.
It's very different, but it's also very good.
Yeah.
I would like to. Mighty Thor is a little hard to pick out an arc. It's because it's very continuous. It's more like where this feels like a miniseries almost, which almost feels like it was meant to be. Mighty Thor is like an ongoing.
Okay.
We could figure it out. I think
there's like the Magog stuff, which is good.
Magog.
Yeah, Marvel
you're going to be
has
introduced. You're going to be introduced to Thor's Rogues Gallery, which is very, very. I think it has a better rap. I really like Thor's Rogue Gallery. So
underrated.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Yep.
Yeah. I would recommend this to literally anybody. Like, if you want to read Thor, here. Like, there's really nothing else you need to like search for other than this. This is it.
Anything else, I think, would be too complicated.
Or too antiquated. Like I would recommend Walt Simonson's Thor, but I don't think the everyman would. Like I don't think I can give it to my friend who just started reading comics. Like Walt Simonson's Thor is, you kind of have to have like a like for comic books already to be able to appreciate that. I think it's just as good. And then you look at like Straczynski's Thor, which is just Game of Thrones in Thor. Like you can't just jump into that shit, and it's not printed regularly in an omnibus, which I'm still trying to come to terms with. But I think like in terms of like if you are to recommend a Thor comic to somebody, where you can recommend them like a book or two, this is the book.
Yeah,
hands down.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, if you guys are listening to this and you haven't read the book, you go pick it up. It is, again, a lot of this stuff is going into the movie. So if you want to be brushed up before Love and Thunder, check this out. Or if you're listening to this after you've seen the movie and you want more, check this out. There's literally no reason not to. If you want to take part in voting for the next book that we'll do, for the book club, patreon.com/thecomicspals. This was again voted by the patrons. So thank you to everyone who voted. We appreciate you all. Check us out all over the internet, the Comics Pals, youtube.com/thecomicspals, twitch.tv/thecomicspals. Watch our main show live Saturdays at 10:15 Eastern. And watch Pals Pulls, our comics review show, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, take care, guys.
See you next month.